You are listening to Stories by my pause.
I'm just gonna say it straight up, because there's no good way to ease into this. I married my boss in a courthouse bathroom break room situation 3 weeks ago, and now I can't stop thinking about the way she bites her lower lip when she's nervous. And this was supposed to be fake, but I think I'm screwing everything up. Sorry that came out messy, but that's kinda how my brain is right now. Let me back up. So 3 weeks ago, I was just Jace Chen, 23-year-old guy who answered phones and fixed printer jams at a small tech startup in Portland. My biggest concern was whether the Thai place down the street would still be open when I got off work. Normal stuff. Boring stuff. And then my boss, Fallon, walked into the office looking like her world was ending and asked me to marry her, and I said yes before my brain could catch up with my mouth. I know how that sounds. Trust me, I know. My roommate Tyler literally laughed for 5 minutes straight when I told him, and then realized I was serious and just stared at me like I'd grown a second head. But here's the thing. When someone you've been low-key, maybe sorta attracted to for 2 years asks you to save her entire company by pretending to be her husband, apparently you just say yes and deal with the consequences later. Which is exactly what I did. It was a Tuesday, and I was eating leftover pad thai that definitely smelled a little off. But I was eating it anyway, because grocery shopping is hard. And I'm lazy. I had sauce on my shirt, but my hair was doing that thing where it sticks up weird in the back, and I was halfway through an email about printer toner when Fallon's office door slammed open. And I mean, she looked wrecked. Her hair was falling out of the bun she always wore, her eyes were red, and she had this look on her face like someone had just told her the worst news possible. In 2 years of working for her, I'd never seen Fallon look anything less than completely put together. She was one of those people who always seemed like they had everything figured out. You know, always professional, always 3 steps ahead, always wearing these blazers that probably cost more than my rent. Seeing her like this felt fundamentally wrong. "Jace, I need to talk to you right now," she said, and her voice cracked on my name, which made my stomach drop. When I stood up so fast, I knocked my phone off the desk and left it there. "Yeah, what's wrong? Are you okay?" She motioned me into her office and shut the door hard behind us. The blinds were already closed, which never happened. Fallon hated closed blinds. Always said she needed to see everything happening in the office. She sat down at her desk and put her head in her hands for a second before looking up at me. "I'm about to ask you something completely insane, and I need you to hear me out before you say no." My heart started doing this weird pounding thing. "Okay, you're scaring me a little bit. The company's done. The investors are pulling out. All of them. We have 3 weeks before everything shuts down and everyone loses their jobs." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "Wait, what?" "Much, but we just landed that huge contract with the school district. We're doing good. The software is actually working. My ex-husband is the main investor," she cut me off, "and he's sabotaging everything because apparently ruining my life once wasn't enough entertainment for him." I knew Fallon had been married before. She'd mentioned it once in passing like a year ago and never brought it up again, so I never asked. She was only 26, just 3 years older than me, and sometimes I forgot she'd already been through this whole marriage and divorce thing while I was still trying to figure out how to be a functional adult. That's actually psychotic. Can he even legally do that? Technically, yes, and he did. She pressed her fingers against her temples and closed her eyes. "There's one way to save everything, but it's completely ridiculous and involves you, and I'm so sorry I'm even thinking this, but I don't have anyone else I trust." My mouth went dry. "What do you mean involves me?" She looked at me, and her eyes were this really dark brown that looked almost black in the office lighting, and I could see her trying to figure out how to say whatever she was about to say. "There's a clause in the original investment contract from when Marcus and I started the company. If I'm married, my spouse gets equal decision-making power. He thought it was romantic when we wrote it, like we were building something together as a team. She laughed, but it sounded bitter. Now, if I'm married to someone else, he loses his leverage, and the other investors have to honor their contracts instead of following whatever he says. It took my brain a second to understand where this was going. So you need to get married. I need to marry someone I can trust completely. Someone who would sign legal documents protecting both of us. Someone who understands this is purely business and wouldn't screw me over. She paused, and I watched her throat move when she swallowed. You're the only person who fits that. I know this is insane, and I'm your boss, and this is probably illegal in some way, but I'm asking anyway. The air conditioning was humming too loud. Someone laughed in the main office. My heart was beating in my ears. You're asking me to marry you, I said slowly, just to make sure I understood. Temporarily, but with a prenup. All business. You'd get a huge raise immediately and a massive bonus when we get divorced in a year or however long this takes. I have a lawyer ready to draw up paperwork protecting both of us legally. We wouldn't even have to live together or see each other outside work if you didn't want. I stood up because sitting felt impossible and started pacing in front of her desk. This was crazy. This was actually completely insane. People didn't do stuff like this in real life, except apparently they did. Because Fallon was sitting there watching me pace with this desperate hope on her face, trying not to show how much she needed me to say yes. Here's what I wasn't saying out loud. I'd been half in love with Fallon Martinez since about month 3 of working for her. Not in a creepy way. I never acted on it or made it weird. Well, I just noticed things, like how she took her coffee with so much sugar it was basically candy. How she got this tiny crease between her eyebrows when she was concentrating really hard on something. How she remembered everyone's birthdays and always asked about their lives and actually listened. How last year, when my mom had surgery, Fallon stayed late 3 nights helping me research doctors and make phone calls even though it had nothing to do with work. And sometimes I'd catch her looking at me in meetings and my whole chest would get tight, and I'd have to remind myself that she was my boss, and I was professional, and this wasn't a thing. But now she was asking me to marry her, and my brain was short-circuiting. If I did this, I heard myself say, we'd need serious boundaries, but like actual rules so this doesn't get complicated. She nodded fast. Completely. All business. Separate lives. Nobody has to know except the lawyers and investors. And after it's done, we just go back to normal? You're my boss, I'm your employee, we pretend none of this happened? Exactly. I looked at her, and she looked at me, and something happened in the space between us that made my skin feel too tight. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff with someone asking you to jump, but you can't see the bottom. Okay, I said. Let's do it. The relief that went across her face was so intense it physically hurt to see. Are you serious? Jace, are you sure? No, I'm absolutely not sure, but I'm saying yes anyway. When? Tomorrow. I already looked into it. We can go to the courthouse downtown, it's quick. Tomorrow. I laughed and it sounded kind of manic. Cool. Yeah. Sure, I'll just get married tomorrow. That's a completely normal Wednesday activity. She stood up and walked around her desk, and I thought maybe she was going to hug me, but she stopped and stuck her hand out for a handshake instead. Professional. Business. Thank you, she said quietly. I know this is asking way too much, but thank you. I took her hand, and it was smaller than mine, and warm. And I had this flash of wondering what it would feel like to actually hold her hand for real, instead of shaking it. I shoved that thought down immediately. Yeah, well, I'm getting paid so. I tried to joke, but it came out wrong. We stood there in her office with the sun setting through the closed blinds, making orange stripes on the floor, and both of us knowing we were about to do something that would change absolutely everything. I just didn't know how much yet. Wednesday morning, I woke up at 6 a.m. after sleeping maybe 2 hours total and stared at my ceiling thinking about how I was getting married today. Married. To my boss. To save her company. This was my life now, apparently. I put on my only good suit, which had a small coffee stain on the sleeve that I tried to cover with my hand. Fallon met me at the courthouse wearing this simple blue dress and her hair down, which I'd never seen before, and I forgot how to breathe for a second. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I said back. We went inside and filled out paperwork and stood in front of a judge who looked way too tired to care about our story. He said words, and we said, "I do," and signed things, and just like that, we were married. The word kept bouncing around my head, not making sense. Fallon kept her last name Martinez for work, but on the papers she was Fallon Martinez Chen, and seeing my last name attached to hers did something weird to my chest. In the courthouse bathroom after I splashed cold water on my face and looked at myself in the mirror, my hands were shaking. I felt like I was watching someone else's life from outside. When I came out, Fallon was by the door on her phone, looking stressed. "So, Mrs. Chen," I said, without thinking, and she looked up, startled. "Don't," she said, but there was almost a smile. "We should talk logistics. Coffee?" We ended up at this cafe near the courthouse, sitting across from each other in a booth trying to act normal, but everything felt different now. When her knee bumped mine under the table, I felt it everywhere. The investors' meeting is Friday," she said, dumping sugar in her coffee. "I'll show them the marriage certificate and new terms, and Marcus can't block anything anymore. And we stay married for how long? Year, probably, to make it look real." She paused. "You look really pale. Are you okay?" "I got married to my boss on a Wednesday morning," I'm processing. She bit her lip, and I'd never noticed before how she did that when she was nervous. "We can annul it if this is too weird." "No," I said too fast. "No, I'm in. I committed." Something crossed her face I couldn't read. "Okay, good." We planned everything out, living separately, acting normal at work, weekly dinners to stay coordinated. It all sounded professional and manageable. But that night when I got home and saw the marriage certificate on my counter, my hands started shaking again. Because I was realizing something I really didn't want to admit. Pretending to be married to Fallon was going to be way too easy. And that scared me more than anything. Part 2. So the investors' meeting happened on Friday, and I wasn't supposed to be there. But Fallon texted me at like 7 in the morning saying, "Please come, I need moral support," and I couldn't say no to her. I showed up in my second best suit, because my good one still smelled like courthouse anxiety sweat, and sat in the back of the conference room trying to be invisible. Fallon stood at the front of the room, looking like she hadn't slept in days, which she probably hadn't, but her hands were shaking when she pulled out the marriage certificate, and I wanted to go up there and hold them steady, but that would have been weird. "As of Wednesday, I'm legally married," she announced, and the whole room went silent. "Which means, according to Section 12 of our original contract, my spouse now has equal decision-making power in the company. You can't pull funding without his agreement, and he's not agreeing." Her ex-husband, Marcus, was sitting in the corner, and his face went red, then purple. "This is ridiculous. You can't just marry some random guy to... His name is Jace, and he's not random. He's worked here for 2 years and actually cares about this company, unlike you." Fallon's voice was steady, but I could see her gripping the table edge so hard her knuckles were white. "And the contracts you all signed are legally binding, and now you either honor them or we sue. Your choice. It was the hottest thing I'd ever seen in my life, and I had to remind myself to breathe normally. The meeting ended with the investors agreeing to honor their contracts mostly because their lawyers told them they'd lose in court if they didn't. Marcus stormed out without looking at anyone, and Fallon just stood there, looking like she might collapse. When everyone left, I walked up to her. "You okay?" She looked at me, and her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. "We did it. The company's saved." "You did it. I just sat there." "You married me. That's not nothing." She laughed, and it sounded almost hysterical. "Oh God, I can't believe that actually worked." Then she hugged me, and I froze for a second, because we'd never hugged before. Well, not once in 2 years. She was warm and fit perfectly under my chin, and smelled like coffee and something floral, and my brain just stopped working. I put my arms around her carefully like she might break, and felt her breathing hard against my chest. "Thank you, Jace," she whispered into my shirt. We stood like that for probably too long, before she pulled back quickly, looking embarrassed. "Sorry, that was unprofessional." "We're married," I said. "Pretty sure the professional ship has sailed." She laughed for real then, and it made my chest ache. That night she texted me asking if I wanted to celebrate, and I said yes before I could overthink it. We met at this Italian place neither of us could really afford, and ordered wine, even though I don't usually drink wine, and talked about everything except the fact that we were married. "So what made you say yes?" she asked, halfway through her second glass. Her cheeks were flushed, and a piece of hair kept falling in her face. "Like, actually, you could have said no." I pushed pasta around my plate. "I don't know. Felt like the right thing to do, I guess." "That's a terrible reason to marry someone." "Yeah, well, here we are." She looked at me for a long time, and the restaurant felt too small suddenly. "You're a good person, Jace. Better than me, probably." "That's definitely not true." "It is, though. I dragged you into this mess for selfish reasons, and you just went along with it to help me." "The raise helped too," I joked, but she didn't laugh. "I mean it. Thank you." Her foot touched mine under the table and didn't move away, and I forgot what we were talking about. We left the restaurant, and it was raining that light Portland rain that's not quite mist, but not quite actual rain. Fallon didn't have an umbrella, so I gave her my jacket and watched her put it on over her dress. It was way too big on her, and something about that made my heart do a weird flip. "I'll get it cleaned and give it back," she said. "Keep it. I have like 3 of them." We stood on the sidewalk, and neither of us moved to leave. People walked past us and cars drove by, and the rain kept falling, and I realized I didn't want this night to end. "So this is weird, right?" she said finally. "Being married but not really married." "Yeah, it's pretty weird. We should probably establish more rules, like what happens if one of us wants to date someone." The thought of her dating someone else made my stomach hurt, but I nodded. "Yeah, that makes sense. And we should probably do couple things sometimes so people don't get suspicious, like be seen together outside of work." "Couple things," I repeated. "Just for show, obviously, so the investors don't think it's fake." "Right. Obviously." She bit her lip again, and I wanted to tell her to stop doing that because it was driving me crazy. "Maybe we should practice." "Practice what?" "Acting like a couple, so it looks natural." My heart was beating so hard I thought she might hear it. "How do we practice that?" She stepped closer, and the rain made her hair darker, and her eyes looked huge. "I don't know. What do couples do?" "They hold hands," I said, and my voice came out rough. "Okay." She held out her hand, and I took it, and her fingers laced through mine perfectly, like they'd done it 1,000 times before. We stood there in the rain, holding hands like idiots, and I knew I was in trouble. Big trouble. The kind of trouble you can't take back. "This is just practice," she said quietly. "Yeah, just practice." But the way she was looking at me didn't feel like practice at all. She pulled her hand away first. "I should go. Early meeting tomorrow." "Yeah, me too. I mean, not a meeting, but early. I have early." She smiled at my rambling. "Good night, Jace." "Good night, Fallon." I watched her walk to her car and drive away, and stood in the rain for another 5 minutes, trying to get my heart to slow down. When I got home, Tyler was on the couch eating cereal and took one look at my face and said, "Oh, you're screwed, aren't you?" "So screwed," I agreed. Because here's what I'd figured out standing in the rain, holding my fake wife's hand. This wasn't going to stay fake. Not for me, anyway. I was already falling, and we were only 3 days into this marriage, and I had no idea what to do about it. The next week was torture. We did our weekly dinner on Tuesday, and she laughed at my jokes and touched my arm when she talked, and I died a little bit each time. At work, I had to pretend everything was normal, while watching her in meetings and remembering how she felt in my arms after the investors' meeting. Then on Thursday, she showed up at my apartment at 9 p.m., looking upset. And I knew something was wrong. "Marcus is contesting the marriage," she said, soon as I opened the door. "His lawyers are claiming it's fraud. They want proof we're actually together." My stomach dropped. "What kind of proof?" She walked past me into my apartment, which was a mess, because I wasn't expecting company. "I don't know. Photos, witnesses, evidence we're living like a real married couple." She turned to look at me, and her eyes were scared. "Jace, I think you need to move in with me." The room tilted sideways. "Move in?" "Just temporarily. To make it look real. My place is bigger anyway, and if his lawyers come snooping, we need to look legitimate." "When?" "This weekend. I know it's fast, but..." "Okay," I said. She blinked. "Okay? Just like that?" "What choice do we have?" She looked at me for a long moment, and something passed between us that felt dangerous. "Thank you. Again. I keep having to thank you." "Stop thanking me." "I can't help it." We stood in my messy apartment with my unwashed dishes in the sink and my laundry on the couch, and everything was changing again, whether I was ready or not. Moving in with Fallon was either going to be the best decision or the worst mistake of my life. I was betting on worst. Part 3. Moving in with Fallon was absolutely the worst idea, because it turned out living with someone you're fake married to but actually falling for is literal torture. Her apartment was nice, way nicer than mine, with big windows and actual furniture that matched. Yet she cleared out half her closet for me and showed me which drawer in the bathroom was mine, and the whole time I was trying not to think about how domestic this all felt. "So I usually make coffee around 6:30, she said nervously, showing me around the kitchen. "But I can be quiet if you sleep later. I'm up at 6 anyway." "Oh, okay, good." We stood there awkwardly until she laughed. "This is so weird. We're married, and I don't even know what time you wake up." 6, sometimes 5:45 if I can't sleep. "I'll remember that." The first week was okay, because we barely saw each other. She'd be gone before I woke up, or I'd work late to avoid coming home to her. But then on Saturday, she was making breakfast when I came out of my room, and she was wearing sweatpants and a tank top, with her hair messy and no makeup, and I realized I was completely done for. "Morning," she said, not looking at me. "I made extra eggs if you want." I sat at her kitchen counter and ate scrambled eggs and watched her move around the kitchen and thought about how I could probably do this every morning for the rest of my life and be happy, which was a problem. "So Marcus's lawyers want to do a home visit next week," she said casually, like this wasn't insane. They'll probably ask us questions separately to see if our stories match. What kind of questions? Like how we got together, personal stuff about each other, that kind of thing. She finally looked at me. We should probably actually get to know each other. So we spent that weekend learning everything. I found out she was allergic to strawberries and hated horror movies, and wanted to adopt a dog someday, but didn't think she had time. She learned I couldn't cook to save my life, and played guitar badly, and had a scar on my knee from falling off my bike when I was 7. "Show me," she said about the scar, and I rolled up my sweatpants, and she touched it gently with her finger, and I stopped breathing. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "Not anymore." She kept her hand there longer than necessary, and when she looked up at me, something shifted. We were sitting on her couch, close enough that I could count her freckles, and the air felt heavy. "Jace," she said quietly. "Yeah? This is getting complicated, isn't it?" My heart was pounding. "No, yeah. We should probably talk about that." "Probably." Neither of us moved. Her hand was still on my knee, and I could see her pulse beating in her throat. "I think I'm messing this up," she whispered. "The whole keeping it business thing." "Me too," I admitted. "Since when?" "Since pretty much the beginning, if I'm being honest." She made this small noise, and then suddenly she was kissing me, and I was kissing her back, and my brain short-circuited completely. Her hands were in my hair, and mine were on her waist, and she tasted like the coffee we'd been drinking, and everything made sense finally. When we broke apart, we were both breathing hard. "That wasn't very professional," she said. Fallon, we're literally married and living together? I think professional is gone." She laughed and kissed me again, and I decided this was my new favorite sound in the world. "I really like you," she said against my mouth. "Like not fake married like you. Actually like you." "Good, because I'm pretty sure I'm in love with you, and have been for like 2 years. She pulled back to look at me. 2 years? Give or take. "You're an idiot, why didn't you say anything?" "You were my boss. That's like textbook inappropriate." "And marrying me wasn't?" "That was business," I said, and she hit my shoulder laughing. We kissed for a while longer until she pulled away looking serious. "What are we doing? Like actually? When this is over and we don't have to be married anymore, who says we have to stop being married?" She blinked at me. What? I mean, we're already married. We already live together. We clearly like each other. Why not just stay married for real?" "Jace, that's crazy." "This whole thing has been crazy from the start. Might as well commit." I took her hands. "Look, I know we did this backwards, and it started fake, but it doesn't feel fake anymore. Not to me. So, yeah, maybe we date for real, and see what happens. Or maybe we just accept that we're already married, and skip to the good part." Her eyes were wet. "The good part?" "The part where I get to wake up next to you every morning, and make you terrible coffee, and listen to you talk about work stuff I don't understand, and just be with you. For real this time." "You make really terrible coffee," she said, crying and laughing. "I know. You'll have to teach me." She kissed me hard, and I kissed her back, and somewhere in my pocket my phone buzzed with a text from Tyler asking how fake married life was going, and I decided I'd tell him later it wasn't fake anymore. And the lawyers came the next week, and we answered all their questions easily because they were real answers now. Yet, we were in love. Yes, this was legitimate. No, it wasn't fraud. They left looking disappointed, and Marcus's case got thrown out 2 weeks later. 6 months after our courthouse wedding, we had a real one with our families and friends, who all thought it was hilarious we'd secretly been married the whole time. My mom cried. Fallon's dad gave a speech about how he knew we were perfect for each other, even though he'd literally just met me. Tyler was my best man, and spent the whole reception telling anyone who'd listen about how I'd fake married my boss and accidentally fell in love. "You know this is insane, right?" Fallon said during our first dance. "Well, we got married to save my company, and now we're getting married again because we actually want to." "Best business decision I ever made," I said, and she laughed into my shoulder. "I love you," she said. "For real this time." "Pretty sure it was always real," I told her. "We were just too dumb to notice." She pulled back to look at me with those dark eyes I'd been staring at for 3 years now. "So we're doing this? Actually married? We're already married. Have been for 6 months. This is just the party." "You know what I mean." I kissed her in front of everyone and didn't care who saw. "Yeah, we're doing this. Forever, if you'll have me." "Forever sounds good," she said. And it was. Turns out marrying your boss to save her company isn't the craziest thing you can do. No, the craziest thing is realizing halfway through that you'd do it all over again just to be with her. Best fake marriage that turned real I've ever had. Only one, actually. But still, best one.